Have you ever wondered what it would be like to play a puzzle game where 40 people are trying to talk to you at once? Here's a little taste of what the experience of Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice is like.
Look really clearly.
Focus, Senua.
Focus and you'll see.
What happens if you focus?
Yeah. It's lucky none of the puzzles in this game were super difficult, because that many voices is pretty taxing. The reason for those voices is the replication of the hallucinations and voices our main character Senua is experiencing throughout this game. Since I've started working on these weekly achievement hunting videos, I've been burning through my backlog of games from the last couple of years, and this game is no different, because once again I have managed to play a game and schedule the upload for right around the time the sequel will be releasing, but I have not realized that until I've started doing research for the game in between. The story of this game is pretty interesting, but it is a little bit confusing as well, so apologies if I've missed some obvious points. You can feel free to tear into my mistakes in the comments. This game is also still gorgeous, but I had to crank the graphics down a little bit because on max it was recording like this. Yeah, that wasn't gonna work, so sorry if you notice any stuttering. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy doing everything in Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. The game begins with Senua paddling her little boat down some sort of body of water towards the fog and what appears to be some big mass of land. We also seem to have a head strapped to our waist, and the head seems to be breathing. So, little interesting to see where that's going. The narrator voice tells us that there will be no more stories after this one, which again seems kinda weird because we know that there's a sequel coming out. But, you know, hindsight. We also learn from the main voice that these voices that we're hearing have always been there for Senua, but they've been amplified since some sort of tragedy occurred. We land our boat on the shore and we see that there are a lot of bodies piled up around the area, and we better get used to this because they aren't going away. But we push our boat away because there is no going back now and we have to keep moving forward. The first thing we see upon landing is one of these lore stones. Now in these lore stones, a guy named Druth tells us some stories about mythology or things like that that kind of relate to what we're going through in the story. These are the only collectible in the game, so I'm not really going to be including any of these, but there's a bunch of them that I need to collect as I go through. As we keep moving forward, the area around us gets darker and darker, and the voices in our head tell us to run faster and faster. It really feels like someone is hunting us down here, and we don't know where the story is going yet, but they are doing a great job setting the scene. Eventually we emerge from the darkness and see into the distance something that looks like a big dragon to me, but this is the place called Helheim, where all of the souls of the dead are being kept by the goddess Hela. We also get a little more confirmation that this head that we're carrying belongs to a guy named Dillion, and we are on a quest to go get his soul back from Helheim. So that's our basic quest laid out. The goddess Hela is holding Dillion's soul in Helheim, the land of the dead. So we need to find a way to cross this big bridge into the mouth of the dragon to enter and get his soul back. After that, we get a brief flashback to the guy named Druth that I mentioned briefly before. Now this guy isn't really on our adventure with us, but he's kind of like a guide for us. We met him previously before the game started, and his stories are helping guide us through the Underworld. A huge part of progressing through this game and solving a lot of puzzles have to do with these symbols that we find on locked doors. Then we have to go out into the environment and try to find that symbol and match it up based on our perspective with different items in the area. A lot of these aren't super exciting, and it does get kind of repetitive after a little while, so we're not going to be showing these, but it is a huge part of this game and the storytelling. But after we find the symbol in the environment, the kind of lock thing goes away and we're able to open up the door and proceed. We do a little walk over the worst bridge of all time, and man, this game just looks so cool. Next, we follow some white paint markers that make people on Twitter.com very, very mad. And then finally, we emerge to face the gate to Helheim, earning the first achievement of the game, The Fight Begins. We try to open up the door, but it turns out that they want to keep the gate for the dead locked up pretty tight, so someone is coming to interrupt us. Senua begs to get Dillion back, but this spirit doesn't seem to really be super happy about that, so Senua recoils, grabbing her arm. Seems to be kind of infected or something. I don't know, there's some sort of rot going on there. We don't have long to reflect on the rot though, because some enemies have started spawning. Honestly, the combat in this game started out a little clunky, but it was one of my favorite parts. It was actually pretty good. And as the fight started out a little bit clunky, we get taken out by a very shadowy figure and we fall down while clutching our arm. But it turns out that that fight didn't actually happen. The corpse of Senua isn't real there, that was just a vision to what could happen to us if we allow the rot to spread up towards our head. The game warns us that as we fail, the rot spreads more, and we have to stop that, obviously. Back to the door, it is still sealed tightly, and we're going to need to take out two gods, the god of fire Surt and the god of illusion Valraven, to be able to open that door. So we've got two paths that we can take now. I opt to head for the fire giant Surt first, which I think is technically not the canon path, but it's all the same anyway, we'll have to do both regardless, so I just went with the one on the right first. So we go about our day fighting off some more enemies, and then we have to light these different little sigils up, and the way to do that is to essentially light ourselves on fire and the world around us and run through a little barricade thing. When we get to the other side of the barricade, we learn that all of that fire seemed to be an illusion in our mind being caused by that sigil that we touched. One of the voices in our head tells us you can't overcome suffering if you refuse to look at it, and that is a pretty central tenet to this game. As I'm wandering around the next area, I get very stuck under this tree to the point that I had to completely close the game and reopen it to be able to get myself free from here, but this is the only time this happened in the game. While we're feeling down, we get a little prep talk from Dillion in our mind, and it's time for us to get up and keep pursuing his soul. And finally, it's time for us to come face to face with the fire giant Surt. As soon as this fight begins, I get taught the hard lesson that this is not a parry boss, this is a dodge boss, and I die right away. But on our second attempt, with the knowledge of dodging existing in our mind, we managed to take out the fire giant, which allows us to open up one half of that gate into Helheim, and we earn achievement number 2, Extinguished, for winning that fight as well. On our way back to check out the second gate, we get our first encounter with one of these shield enemies, and these are the one thing that make the combat in this game not very good, because these guys are just so annoying to fight throughout the whole thing. But with Mr. Shield out of the way, now we can go try to take on Valraven, the Master of Illusion, and go through the second gate. Where the last area had those fire shrines that we needed to work with, this area has these weird arches that allow us to step through them and reveal different illusions throughout the world. This area is mostly the same, but kind of a different vibe. In the last area, Surt basically said, "Here I am, you can come find me." But in this area, we spend the majority of our time looking at these little fake Valravens that we need to chase down, eventually leading to the real one. In this area, we also get our first clue to some sort of trip out into the wilds that Senua took before the events of this game, and that's something that will be very important for later on in the story. We also learn that while Senua was out in the wilds, she almost gave in to the darkness inside of her, but she continued pressing on due to a promise she made to Dillion to return, so that might explain some of this quest we're on. As we reach the end of Valraven's level, we seem to have some sort of realization that we were with Valraven out in the wilds, and Valraven isn't really a physical spirit, but is actually something that exists within Senua herself. Now, we thought that we conquered the spirit before, but obviously it's still here, so we didn't quite do that. But now, with the help of Druth, we managed to look into a mirror, which allows us to see Valraven for what it really is. So now that we've seen Valraven, we can get into the actual fight, and I think this fight should have been before the fire giant, because this fight was much easier. And just like before, once we've taken out Valraven, we get the key to unlock the second half of the gate to Helheim, and we earn the achievement Master of Illusion. On our way out of the level, we also learn some more key information that the same darkness that Senua has seemed to also possess her mother. So now with both bosses defeated, we are able to open up the gate and cross into Helheim. But when we get to the other side, we find that we are completely encased in darkness because this is the land of the dead, and we don't really belong here. As the darkness starts to fade away, we get some images displayed to us. It appears that a village lies completely in ruin, and we see Dillion strung up in the distance. It seems like when Senua returned from her trip to the wild, she returned to the village and found that it had been completely ransacked by raiders. and finding Dillian's corpse strung up, she decided to remove his head because that is where the soul lives in an attempt to get him back. As reality comes back, we continue pushing forward across a bridge where we earn the achievement Source of the Darkness. We come face to face with the goddess of rot Hela that we came to face, but when we see her we are completely paralyzed by fear as she slowly creeps forward towards us. When we finally stand up to try to fight back, our sword is destroyed and we are launched off the bridge down onto a beach below. Senua has a moment reflecting on her failures and her fears where she thinks about giving up, but her promise to Dillian once again holds supreme and she wants to continue on her mission to get him back. So now we're walking down a beach swordless, but we've got a little bit of a guide. We see this weird blue spirit thing that sounds like Dillian guiding us towards this tree that we can see in the distance. As we walk towards the tree, we notice some things that shift around us, and we get a little bit of insight into the past. We get a flashback to Senua's first meeting with Dillian. He is a warrior from another tribe that has come to take part in something called the Warrior Trials. Dillian notices that Senua has become quite skilled with a sword, but she wasn't actually formally taught. She learned everything that she knew from watching him practice. That provided some great insight into the relationship between Senua and Dillian, but we still have to keep moving forward. He's led us to this weird glowing blue tree for some reason, and we need to investigate why. When we get up to the tree, we find the source of the glowing blue light, and it turns out Dillian was right. He did know exactly what we needed, a sword. We just broke ours when we fell down the bridge, but this one doesn't seem super receptive to coming with us just yet. It turns out that that sword has a little bit of mythology behind it. Its name is Grammar, and we need to go through 4 trials to unlock the ability to be worthy of wielding it. So let's get started. We walk up to this first blue shard, and it's go time. We approach this weird mine cellar thing that is completely pitch black inside, but we grab a torch off the wall and persevere. Inside is a kind of maze-like puzzle that we have to explore while listening out for Dillian's voice guiding us towards the end. Eventually we follow a red light to a door where we earn the achievement Escaped for making our way out of the labyrinth. We get another flashback to a conversation between Senua and her father. He has been keeping her under lock and key since they found out about the darkness inside of her, the same as her mother. When she says that she's gonna leave to be with Dillian, he's not super happy, but she goes anyway. The second trial sees us exploring some broken down old ruins where we look into a mask to switch between 2 different worlds. A light one where things are nice and restored, and a dark one where things are destroyed. Once again, we follow Dillian to the end, but this time he jumps off the bridge and we earn the achievement Different Perspectives. Despite the spirit form of Dillian jumping off that bridge, we get another flashback to a conversation with Dillian where he really encourages Senua to come with him and fight the darkness inside of her. The third trial is back to walking through these stone arches that restore different things based on the illusion that you can see in different worlds. This trial ends with you running from some sort of fire demon through a level that really feels very The Evil Within, and I was not a super big fan of it. Once we finally escape that fire spirit, we earn the achievement Cure for the Plague. We get some additional insight that once Senua moved to Dillian's village, a plague swept through, killing many people, including Dillian's father, and people seem to be blaming Senua for the curse that she bears. The final trial is kind of like a blindness trial, where we are moving through a completely dark area being only guided by Dillian's advice. At one point we drop down into a room with a big monster, and Dillian says if you can't see it, it can't see you, which seems like just the worst advice you could give when dealing with a predator. We play the worst skinned version of Frogger ever, but eventually we emerge on the other side to earn the achievement Trust Your Senses for completing the blindness challenge. And now that we've completed all 4 of those challenges, we can return to the tree and earn our next achievement for pulling Grammar out of the tree. So now we have this cool blue lightsaber to use for the rest of the game. But then we get another vision, a flashback back to this plague taking over that Senua blames herself and her curse for. So we get another scene that is clearly not happening in real life. We are running through this giant field completely surrounded by the corpses of the people Senua feels she killed. Eventually we escape the field of corpses, coming to Senua's mother's face, who gives us some advice. We also earn the achievement Warrior for escaping all of those corpses. After that brief departure, we return to the real world, and it's time for us to head into the heart of the mountain to face off against Hela for the final time. As we push forward, we earn the achievement Into the Mountain for entering Helheim once and for all. As we begin moving through Helheim, we feel like we're being watched and stalked by some sort of beast, so we rush across a bridge that collapses underneath us, and as we fall, Dillion's head goes crashing down below us. Obviously, we didn't come this far to give up, so we have to go back down and recover it, but when we do, we come face to face with this giant gross beast named Fenrir, and it's time for us to fight. You can call me Bob Barker the way I stay neutering this dog, eventually earning the achievement Tamed the Beast for killing Fenrir and moving on to our final confrontation with Hela. We get a pretty cool animation that shows Senua slowly climbing up the path that we followed down to get the head, and this is just another cool moment with a lot of interesting graphics. Next, we earn the achievement Stories from the North for collecting every single one of the lore stones hidden throughout the world. We actually managed to get every collectible in a single playthrough. It's amazing, never done that before. As we march towards Hela, we are pretty sure that we're going to die in this confrontation, and the voices in our heads start to freak out that they will be dying too, which is a great touch to the writing here, I thought. As we step towards the final fight, we get one bonus scene actually for collecting all of the lore stones before getting to the final battle here. We get one final scene with Druth where he tells us that someone betrayed the people of Dillion's village to the raiders. My interpretation of this is that the betrayal was Senua's father as revenge for her leaving their village in the first place. But we don't have time to analyze that right now, as it's time for us to charge in and get our final battle with Hela going. This is our shot to get Dillion back. On our way up the ramp, obviously the goddess of the dead is extremely well protected. They're throwing more enemies at us than they ever have before, but we're also feeling very powerful with our new sword. We get knocked down, but we continue getting up because we cannot let this final hurdle stand in our way to getting Dillion back. But in the end, we're one person fighting the entire army of the dead. We just can't keep up with all of these enemies, and we earn the achievement The Final Battle, but we actually lost the final battle. We failed to get Dillion back because he's gone. He can't come back. We plead and plead with Hela to bring him back, but she just doesn't comply with us. Eventually, Hela knocks Senua down and walks Dillion's head to the edge of a cliff, dropping the head down deep below. We also notice that Hela is looking quite a bit like Senua in this moment and isn't quite as big as before. When the camera pans back up from that big drop, it's actually Senua. This is the moment that she has let go of Dillion once and for all, and this has been her journey. Finally, Senua says a very sad goodbye to Dillion. So this story wasn't a real adventure. It was the journey of Senua's mind looking to get some closure on Dillion's death that she believed that she had caused. Senua turns around telling us that she has another story to tell, but for now, we have done everything in Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. So how did we do? HowLongToBeat.com lists this game at about 9 hours to 100% complete, but we did it in just under 7 hours, which seems like a pretty big difference. I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe if you just completely ignored lore stones the first time through, you'd have to go back and get those, I guess. As for the actual story of this game, I was pretty confused while I was actually playing through the game, but after having beat it and then going back through all of the footage to make this video, it started to kind of fall into place and click for me what the actual story of the game was. I was kind of expecting to come into this final section and be really negative on this game, but after a full review of what the actual story was, it's still a little bit confusing and, you know, a little bit of it is kind of left up to imagination and not explicitly said, but I actually enjoyed this game more than I thought I did at the time that I had finished it. That being said, do you want me to check out the next game in the series? It's coming out, I believe, the week after this video releases, so, you know, it won't be super soon, but hey, if you guys enjoy this video, that would be an option. Or if you have any other ideas for games that you'd like to see me play, please feel free to leave a comment or, you know, any other comments on things that you'd like to say, as well as a like or a subscription. I really appreciate all of them. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you at next week's video. See ya!